Welcome, everybody, to the City of Farmers Branch City Council Study Session for Wednesday, October 8th. Our first item of business will be public comments. I do have one person that's signed up to speak. Let me remind you, when you come to the podium, please state your name and address. There's a 3-minute time limit, and all speakers shall comply with the city's rules of decorum and conduct for public hearings and citizens' comment, which is available for review on the city's website as well as on the form that was signed. No disparaging remarks or disorderly conduct will be acceptable or allowed. And when you come to the podium, the light will turn green. And when it does turn red, that will be your time to stop. So our first speaker this afternoon is Colleen Rulin.
Hello, I'm Colleen Rulin at Whispering Oak, live in the Oak Brook neighborhood. And I'm here today to commend the city in some efforts we've been working on for a very, very long time. And if I go over my 3 minutes, please forgive me, but there's many people to thank here. Besides council, first, I have to thank the mayor for making sure this was on the agenda. We were unable to get it on the agenda prior to you coming on as mayor, so thank you for that. And Roger, you and your predecessor have done monumental work to help move it through. And in that vein, I would like to say that the council as a whole really took us seriously and really was creative in ways to helping us find ways to fix problems. When I came here originally, we had 6 items on the list of things we needed to address. And I would like to say we are coming near the completion of finishing the 6th item. So I think that's pretty incredible that we have had that partnership, and I hope it can continue in productive ways. I think we've got the hardest part of it out of the way. And Public Works, I need to recognize, because right now during this water meter process, they have really stepped up to manage that contractor and get this thing back on track. And I think that also is representative of our city management staff recognizing that there was a little hiccup in the schedule. So to all of those in Public Works, in the city manager's office, and the council led by the mayor, I would like to thank you all on behalf of our community.
Thank you. We will gladly accept that. I have one other person signed up, except I don't know if they're for now or later. Matt Grant. Matt Grant. All right, we'll hold that one till later. Moving on, our first item of business will be item C1, review and discuss consent and regular agenda items. Councilwoman Bennett?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Councilwoman Villafranca?
No, thank you.
Councilman Neal?
Nothing, thank you.
All right. Moving on. Item C2, receive a presentation from the HR Department, Human Resources Department on harassment and discrimination awareness.
Afternoon, everybody. Jeffrey Ross, Director of Human Resources. I have the privilege to talk to you today about a very important subject, harassment and hostile work environment awareness. And one of the ways I always like to kind of start off this discussion, this conversation, this information is with a little bit about how often this actually happens, and maybe we just don't know about it, you know, both not just here locally, but across the nation. So a figure that I want to share with you comes directly from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and they're the federal arm of the government that investigates all of these types of harassment, discrimination, hostile work environment, all those different types of claims. And just last year in 2024, there were 88,531 new cases that were reported to the EEOC. That's in addition to the roughly 50 to 60,000 active cases they already had going from previous years. So that's just accounting from 1 year. Now, if we take a look at that number and we look at another EEOC report that found that people who experience these types of things where they work in the work environment. 85% of people never file a formal charge. That's either with the EEOC or that's with the Texas Workforce Commission, which is the Texas equivalent to the EEOC. And a lot of their things mirror. So nobody ever files, 85% of people never file a formal charge, while 70% of people never report it to anybody at all, even internally, to their own teams, to their own managers, to their own HR departments, things like that. So if you take these numbers kind of all in consideration, these are things that is a big reason to have these, have this information come forward, because it does happen a lot more often than we might think. So I just always kind of like to open with that little bit, just so you have that frame of context in the back of your mind. And we're going to go through some of that here today. And so before we start on that, though, I think a really important question to answer is, are elected officials, council members, employees? And so it's a really, really good question, and the answer is kind of nuanced, and it's both yes and also no. It really depends on what context we're talking about. So from the Department of Labor standpoint, the IRS, state and federal attorney generals, some others, you are considered employees. However, in others, specifically under the EEOC and Texas Workforce Commission rules, they do not consider you employees. So in some respects, yes, you're an employee. In other respects, no, you're not an employee. So what you should, the term that everybody should get familiar with, which appears in multiple different both state and federal statutes, is you are an official agent of the city. And so an agent is really anybody who represents the employer in an official capacity, somebody who can make decisions on behalf of the business, somebody who affects the business or the organization. That is what an agent is. And that comes up in a number of different state statutes. It's in both the Texas Labor Code, that's managed by the Texas Workforce Commission. It's under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which is the federal law that governs most of these things. Texas Civil Practice and Remedies Code, otherwise known as the tort laws, and even in the Texas Penal Code and multiple others, the term agent is really the term that really comes across more than anything when we're talking about representatives of the city. Normally in some of these, they're not saying employee, they're saying agent of the city or agent of the organization. So really at all times, whether you're viewed as an employee, whether you're viewed as an agent of the city, you can consider that at all times you really share the same opportunity for trust, credibility, liability as really anybody else who represents the city. And so while you are not governed by our personnel policies, or employees are covered by our personnel policy manual, you are not covered by our personnel policy manual. So today I want to talk just very, very briefly about some of the things that you are governed by, your governing documents, because you don't fall under the personnel policy manual. So the city charter would be the first one. And so the city charter has several different articles. I've put some of the more notable ones here that kind of relate to what we're talking about today, dealing solely through the city manager when it comes to things that they have authority over, being a judge of qualifications of your own members, essentially saying that you govern yourselves and you're the ones who can govern yourselves, official misconduct, and then incompetency in execution of official duties. And more specifically in the Code of Ethics goes deeper on some of these things. And so I've pulled out and I've highlighted some of the relevant pieces from your Code of Ethics that's also held within the city charter that focus on some of these things specifically. And so a big thing that we're talking about today is the discrimination, harassment, hostile work environment, topics such as those. And an important piece that your Code of Ethics calls out is that it bridges that gap between, does the employee-employer relationship exist? Because the Code of Ethics explicitly states that it views these situations as though they occurred in an official employee-employer relationship. And that's a really important part to point out. It also deals with how you relate to your interactions with city manager and staff. proper ways to both engage with staff, how to use the staff, and then the final two sections in there really deal with, we go back to the city charter where it talks about being able to govern yourselves and how to bring forward official complaints against members of the council and any violations that may exist for that. So the city charter and the code of ethics are really your governing documents. Just like for employees, it's our personnel policy manual. For y'all, it's going to be more of your code of ethics and what's held within the city charter. Besides that, no matter who we are, no matter we're an employee, an agent, no matter really what role we serve here as a representative of the city, there's certain things that all of us are subject to regardless of what our city charter says or regardless of what our personnel policy says. So state and federal laws certainly apply. And I want to highlight some of the big ones here. So one of the big ones is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is the federal law that determines all of the protected classes and characteristics for employees, how to make complaints, and they also are the ones that are typically going to start the process for looking at organizations and determining have they committed some type of violation of the Civil Rights Act. So another important one to make note of is the American with Disabilities Act, Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and the more recent PUMP Act. These are things, so disability discrimination, harassment, hostile work environment based off somebody's disability is becoming increasingly more common, so common that they've, in just the past few years, passed some laws specifically about pregnant workers. And then the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, and that prohibits the discrimination or harassment of individuals aged 40 or over. And then some important state laws. So most of those things that I just talked about at the federal level, most of those things are handled and governed by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. Here at the state level, most of these things are looked at by the Texas Workforce Commission, the TWC, which is most of the language that's in the Texas Labor Code. Over about the past 10 years, they've spent a lot of time and effort in mirroring the language that's in the Texas Labor Code to what's in the federal law, into Title VII. And so a lot of what's in the Texas Labor Code is going to mirror what's at the federal level. There are a couple important differences that we'll talk here in just a little bit. Another one at the state level would be things like the Texas Open Meetings Act, which covers executive session confidentiality, discussions held with less than quorum. Everybody here is pretty familiar with that one as it governs the meeting we're in right now. So, and then the Texas Whistleblower Act, which prohibits retaliation against employees who report any kind of misconduct or wrongdoing, specifically in a public agency. So regardless of our role, no matter really who we are, these state and federal laws apply to us at all times. And so the two types of harassment that is general discrimination, harassment, hostile work environment, there's two primary types that are generally reported to the EEOC or the TWC when an official complaint or claim is brought. And so the first one of those is going to be what's called quid pro quo, and that's a Latin term for this, for that. And it sounds just like it is. Essentially, it's some aspect of business or a condition of employment or anything that really happens in the work environment that's based on a trade for something. I'll do this for you if you do this thing for me. And now sometimes those things can be perfectly permissible. But if it ever involves something that is going to be an inappropriate trade, or if it's made, in coercion or in threat of somebody to do something that could have a consequence on their employment or their safety, that would be considered a type of harassment that would fall under quid pro quo. It's much less common in the workplace, but is much more defined and usually has a pretty clear structure of somebody was trying to get this by doing that. The more common type, really the most common type of harassment discrimination that we see is the actual term for it is hostile work environment. And this really happens, this is much less defined and much more subjective to the individual that it happens to. And it happens when someone says or does something to someone else and the other person, they feel offended, they feel like they're being harassed or discriminated against or being retaliated against. That's where that type of hostile work environment harassment comes up. And sometimes with what we see, the behavior doesn't necessarily start in a way that's intentionally, harassing or retaliatory. But over time, it can grow to be that way. And we'll talk a little bit about what makes a hostile work environment. So as defined by the EEOC and the Texas Workforce Commission, hostile work environment occurs when unwelcomed or unwanted disparate treatment, discrimination, and the like happens to somebody based on their protected class or characteristic. Some of those including race, color, religion, sex, age, national origin, disability, or genetic information. So a lot of these behaviors, they can be verbal, they could be nonverbal, they can be really any single or combination of behaviors if it's enough to affect that employee. And when we look at what qualifies the hostile work environment, the EEOC and the Texas Workforce Commission essentially look at two key things. And so they're going to look at if the behavior is severe enough to disrupt or impair the employee's ability to do their job, to feel safe in the workplace, to maintain a sense of integrity in the workplace. Or if the behavior is pervasive enough to form a consistent pattern that does the same. So this is an or situation. This is not an and situation. So the behavior can be either severe enough or pervasive enough in order to qualify as a hostile work environment. It doesn't have to be both happening at the same time. And so some examples of some of what that might look like. If we're asking questions that are consistently more critical or skeptical based on an employee's race, or if we're consistently treating members of the opposite sex in a disparate or inappropriate manner, or we're overly critical of information by people who maybe have a foreign accent, or we have thoughts about their citizenship status, things like that, if we treat them differently because of that, or we bend rules or procedures for some groups and not others. And so whether an important piece to point out as part of this is under the TWC and the EEOC laws, that hostile work environment really happens when it's based on a person's protected class, something that we just talked about. But really, even if it's not based on a person's protected class, it can still cause a lot of issues for the city. So hostile or demeaning or inappropriate behavior can still bring claims against the city. It can still get us sued. It can still cost us, money on, lawyers and trial fees and all sorts of different things, not to mention the liability that always exists for damages and things of that nature. So just because it doesn't fit this actual technical definition of hostile work environment under the EEOC or the TWC, it doesn't mean, excuse me, it doesn't mean that it can't create problems for the city. Okay. Sorry, I had something catching up there. Thank you so much. That's excellent. Thank you. Okay. So we want to talk about some of those types of behaviors and what some of that may look like. So the first one that we want to talk about is kind of one that may be more apparent, and that's going to be non-consensual physical contact. So this could include grabbing someone in an attempt to intimidate them. Maybe you grab somebody by the arm, or you put your hand on their shoulder, something like that, right? In an attempt to intimidate them or threaten them. Touching, grabbing, or groping anybody on any part of their body, shoulder massages, hugging, or other inappropriate and uninvited contact, making someone else touch you, or actual or attempted sexual or physical assault. Some nonverbal behaviors could occur through, doing things like rolling your eyes when somebody is talking to you, giving dramatic sighs, or mock clapping, in order to mock them. Or other things like licking your lips, blowing kisses, taking pictures of others without their consent, throwing things or slamming drawers or doors for effect, standing over someone or physically close enough to crowd or intimidate them, holding someone up intentionally or blocking their exit from wherever they are, or even giving someone the silent treatment, ignoring them, just saying, you need this answer from me, but I'm not happy with you doing something, so now I'm just going to give you the silent treatment. I'm going to make your job harder, right? So virtual harassment. It sounds just like it is. This is harassment that occurs through digital means. So this is going to be texts, emails, official communication channels, things like that. And it could include sending or asking for explicit or inappropriate photos. It could include things like cyberstalking, where you create fake social media accounts to gain access to somebody else's social media presence or online presence, tagging of others on social media without consent, or coercing someone with previously received content. And then finally, verbal behaviors. And I can tell you that in my experience, verbal behaviors are usually where most of these things begin. People say something, they make a comment. It may even not be, intentionally offensive to begin, and then it can grow into something else. So, but verbal behaviors are really the most common. And so that could be speech that intimidates, threatens, or instills fear in people. It could also be coercive statements that threaten punishment, innuendos or things that are suggestive or in reference to sexual behavior, sarcasm, mocking, derogatory, demeaning, belittling, humiliating remarks, or sexually suggestive, insensitive, or offensive jokes or comments about another person, and things that may be specific or unique to that person, especially if it's a protected class. So these are some of those types of behaviors. We just point them out just to give you an idea of some of the things that we should be aware of as we're doing our business here at the city. Now, these are a couple of different, we've talked about the quid pro quo, we've talked about the hostile work environment. The number one most common claim and the number one most common finding by the EEOC and the TWC is something known as retaliation. We're going to talk about that now. So retaliation is pretty simple, and it's really any adverse or negative action that's taken against somebody who does something that they're allowed to do. Employees and people who are here at the city are allowed to complain about, say, their manager. People are allowed to complain about things that they see in the workplace. They're allowed to participate in investigations that happen in the workplace. They're allowed to do a number of different things. And if we find out about that and we do something that is adverse or negative, we take some kind of action against them, that can be considered retaliation. So we put some of those examples of that here. Some of those adverse actions could include no longer allowing the person to present or speak at official meetings, ignoring emails, phone calls, and refusing to respond or otherwise communicate to essential issues, especially if that wasn't the norm prior to that behavior happening, right? If somebody has just say raised a complaint and now all of a sudden they get the silent treatment, that can be considered retaliatory. Being irregularly aggressive, dismissive, or hostile in your questions, attempting to dissuade them from making complaints or participating in investigations, punishing the person through third parties, or openly defaming, labeling, or embarrassing them. There's many other ways that it could happen, but we just try and give enough examples here so you kind of get the idea of it, because retaliation is very, very simple. Someone does something that they're allowed to do, and we take an adverse or disparate action against them for doing that thing that they were allowed to do. And the arrows here indicate that oftentimes this can be a cycle of things, a cycle of behaviors that continue to happen. The person reported something. We do something adverse to them. They report that, and now we up the game again by retaliating again, right? So it can become this cycle very, very simply. And why it's the most common finding is because the original complaint, once retaliation happens, let's just say that somebody makes a complaint. Whether or not that complaint has any merit to it or not can no longer become, it can come to a point where it's no longer the primary concern or the primary issue. What they will look at is, did they make the complaint? Yes, they did. And then were they treated in an adverse or negative way? Did they have some benefit or consequence of their employment affected by that? Yes, they did. And so now that really becomes the thing they're looking at. It's not whether the original complaint had merit to it anymore. It's, did they make the complaint, and did we do something to them for making that complaint that they were allowed to make? And so the original complaint can still be investigated and found true alongside the retaliation, or the original complaint can actually be found without merit, but the retaliation by us can still be found to be true. So that's why it's the number one most common thing that's reported and the most common finding in most of the cases. So let's talk about some consequences and implications. So per the Texas Labor Code, under the Texas law, we commit an illegal employment action if any of the actions that we've discussed here today, if any of those things happen and we either knew or should have known that they were happening and we didn't take immediate and appropriate action. Basically, we saw something and we did nothing. So that's pretty basic as how an illegal employment action can be committed. So some of the consequences for that, obviously reputational damage, which is hard to live down, especially if it starts making its way around. It's hard to recover from that reputational damage from these types of things happening. Civil lawsuit liability is always going to be something that's going to be accompanying most of these things. So, financial damages, things like that. And even depending on the severity of the situation, especially some physical aspect of it has been involved, jail time or criminal charges could be a consequence of that. And so an important thing under the Texas law that does deviate a little bit from the federal law is that in some cases, you can be held personally liable if you meet the standards that are here, that you knew or should have known that something was happening and you didn't take immediate or appropriate action. You can actually be sued personally apart from or alongside the city, but that would mean that you're gathering your own attorney, you're paying your own fees, all that sort of stuff, if that were to happen. So that's a really important part to note as we're talking through some of these outcomes. So let's talk about what to do if you experience or if you witness harassment, retaliation, or discrimination. So I go back to, as an agent of the city, as the EEOC and the TWC reads, you have a responsibility to do something about it as an agent of the city. So one of the best things that you can do when you do experience these things is tell the other person to stop if you feel comfortable enough to do so. Not everybody feels comfortable enough to do that, and that's okay. But if you do feel comfortable enough to tell them to stop, also try and put that stop through some official communication that we can come back to later, so that we can say, well, we told you that this wasn't going to be acceptable, and it continued to happen anyways. But if you don't feel comfortable telling them to stop, that's fine. But what we do want you to do is report the behavior. And there's a couple different ways to report it here, and it's based on the situation. So if you observe something that happens to a city employee, you want to report it to the city manager, preferably by our official city email. And if the action or behavior is happening to someone who is not an employee, you want to follow the reporting guidelines that are in section 2-284 of your internal code of ethics. And then to kind of wrap it up, so talk a little bit about the responsibility as an elected official. So your comments, behavior, speech, or any actions that we take should never be about someone's personal or protected characteristics. And those include things like their race, their ethnicity, their national origin, their sex, their disability, their age, their language, marital, child status, religious beliefs, or their garb, things like that. Really anything that is personal or specific to a person or a group of people, the actions or speech or comments should never be made because of those things. You should also never take any retaliatory, adverse, or any type of vindictive actions against somebody who does file a complaint or participate in an investigation, or if they participate in anything else that they're allowed to do in the workplace. And at all times, the behavior and the speech should align with your rules of procedure, code of ethics, and the city charter. And so finally, rather than trying to get to a point of, is this or isn't it, prevention is always better than reacting and trying to figure out and split the hairs on, is this or isn't it? So prevention is always better than reaction. And so being aware and responsible of our own behavior is really the most important thing that any of us that represent the city, that any of us can do at all times, because we can always watch ourselves. And so some of the self-reflection questions that we like to bring to these discussions, to this information, is to just ask turn the mirror on ourselves and ask ourselves some hard questions. So do we ever treat people different than another, even if that's not our intent? Do we ever say or do things that could be perceived as aggressive, hostile, or inappropriate? Do we put people in situations maybe that they shouldn't been in, where they may be in a situation where they may actually be breaking a policy or being put in that kind of position to potentially break one? Has anybody ever told me that my behavior was inappropriate? Do I respond to conflict in a way that helps resolve it, or do I make it worse? And do I ever bend or flex the rules in the interest of getting things done? These are just some self-reflection questions that are really good to go back and really look at that prevention. You know, being aware of behavior is the best way to prevent behavior. And at all times with staff, citizens, vendors, or anybody else, your behavior, speech, and actions can create trust, credibility, or liability for the city, just like anybody else. And with that, I'll take a pause, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Jeffrey. I was the one that had asked for this. So if a complaint is filed with the TWC, how many days does the employee have to do that?
300 days.
Okay. And there's very specific verbiage in the TWC for municipality electeds, correct?
As it relates to, yes, under the TWC laws, yes.
Yes. So if we don't report something, what happens?
So if acting as an agent of the city, which all of us are, regardless of our role, if we knew or should have known that something was happening, we don't report it, or we don't do anything about it, then we can be held liable for allowing that behavior to happen, and it can create liability for the city.
Okay. All right. I appreciate you, and I know this had to be difficult for you. I asked it for a specific reason, and you'll bring that to us later, but thank you very much for this. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Councilman Reed?
Yep, fantastic, very comprehensive, I appreciate it. That's it.
Councilwoman Villafranca?
I don't know if this is the appropriate moment, but I really would like to request to convene into executive session pursuant to Executive Texas Government Code Section 551.071 to seek legal advice from the city attorney regarding item C2.
Now? You want to go in now?
Can we?
It's a whip question.
We certainly can go into advice if you'd like to go in now to ask questions of city attorney. We can go in at this point.
We can do that now. Okay. Do you want him there? Okay. Council's going to go into executive session right now, so if you'll excuse us, Jeffrey, if you'll come back there with us, please, to discuss item C2. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for bearing with us. We are back. And we have no action report as out of executive session, so we will continue with Councilman Neal.
I'm sorry, regarding C2, correct? Any
C2,
questions?
yes, we're still on item C2.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes.
However, in light of the discussions that occurred from legal counsel in this presentation, I'm reluctant to move forward with any questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman, and I too, I think I'm going to hold my questions at this point, so thank you for your report. Okay. Next up is item C3, discuss and provide direction on the demo rebuild program. Oh, do we need to? He's not on.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Darren Harris, Deputy Director, Economic Development. This afternoon, I had the pleasure of presenting to you the demolition and rebuild program. When we last met on September 2nd, we had 3 proposals in front of us. We had 3-year, 5-year, and 7-year tax incentive rebate. The consensus was with the mayor and council that they wanted to see a 4-year program. And so that is what we are proposing this afternoon, a 4-year program without a 0 cash rebate. And with that, that concludes my presentation. And I look forward to discussion and direction on this.
Thank you very much. Can you leave
Okay.
probably that, yeah, leave that up. We'll start, Councilman Bent.
I don't have any questions. We've talked about it ad nauseum, but I will compromise on the 4-year tax abatement.
Councilman Reed.
I'm right there with you. Looks like a great plan, accomplishes what we want to accomplish. I say we move on.
Thank you. Councilwoman Villafranca.
Appreciate you. I think this looks good.
Councilman Neal.
Thank you very much for all your hard work. I'm in agreement with the other council regarding this.
Thank you very much.
Okay. That should give you the direction that you need for moving forward.
Okay.
So, okay. I'm going to wait on this update because we won't get it done in 9 minutes, I don't think.
It depends if we have questions. It's straightforward, but
Okay.
he's fast.
You think you can get your economic update in?
In 9 minutes,
Or,
I could try.
okay. All right. Well, let's start and see. Next up is item C4, receive a quarterly update from the Economic Development Department.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Darren Harris, Deputy Director, Economic Development. This afternoon, I will be giving you a quarterly update on the Economic Development Department. I'd like to introduce to you myself as well as my team members. Megan Holloway, she's the Economic Development Manager, and Cody Duffy, the Economic Senior Administrator. And first of all, I want to thank the council, mayor, on bringing these developments forward to the City of Farmers Branch. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do any of our work. And I want to also thank the city manager and attorneys for doing the incentive packages and the agreements and the resolutions when it comes to that. That allows my team to do the BRE work and the redevelopment work to go forward and foster the and nurture the relationships that we have with the business that come into the area. So if we look here, one of our big accomplishments for this quarter is the new incentive package that's created for Brinks Monotronics. They are here for another 10 years, and they'll be relocating to a new location and keeping their headquarters here and their sales tax in the city. And we can also look at other accomplishments here in the city, the smaller business such as Treasure Studios and Senior Inc. that help fill out the Mustang shops and make them whole. When we're looking at targeted businesses and events in the for the BRE, just last quarter alone, we did 62 visits, which is astounding for a quarter to do 62 visits. We looked and talked to CEOs, managers, and just businesses that were looking to come into the area. We also had events such as the healthcare event that celebrated healthcare workers. That was attended by city council members as well as healthcare workers, and it was in collaboration with the Firehouse Theater and Mustang Station. We also had a passport to Farmers Branch that was created, which celebrated 24 local businesses here. What they did was gave out incentives and gave out discounts and different pastries depending on what they had to offer. And once that passport was filled up, then you were awarded a prize. And the winner of that prize was Amber Riley, and she had a passport filled, and so she got tickets to the Firehouse Theater shows. We also wanted to celebrate our business anniversaries of the stable stakeholders in the community, and that would be Jim's Pizza with the 50-year celebration that they had, Marshall's Barbecue with the 60-year celebration they had, and Scott and Sutter with the 8-year, and also Jen's Place with the 30-year celebration. When we look at incentives for this quarter, we had 12 demo rebuild incentives that we did. We had 2 facade grants that we did as well. And that helps to revitalize the business area and to revitalize the community as well with the demo rebuild program. We're also now looking at 3 major companies that we're working with, one that we were bringing forth this afternoon that you guys will hear about, and we'll have more subsequently after that. And we're also looking at future possibilities. We're averaging 6 to 8 visits per week when we're talking to businesses and when we're bringing in new businesses, and we're looking at demo rebuild program. Upcoming events that we had is just this past Monday, we had our annual golf tournament, which was a big turnout. We had 27 teams that were represented there, 4 on each team, and it was a great turnout. I also want to thank our tourism team that helped us put that together, and give a special kudos to Megan Holloway, who spearheaded that program. And thanks the mayor and Councilwoman Elizabeth Franco that attended the event. Other upcoming events that we have is the Firefighter Challenge that'll be held in October 20th through the 25th. And then we have the 3rd annual Pickleball Challenge that'll be held in the first week of November. We were asked to look at warehouse and vacancy and multifamily vacancy rates in the area. And if we look at our vacancy rates for warehouse, it's compatible both locally and regionally with the market. Same thing with our multifamily vacancy rates. It's compatible with our local and regional companion cities as well. I want to go back to this just to show you guys. So looking at our rates compared to the next one I'm about to show you, ours was done through CoStar. And we had a concerned constituent that sent in their discrepancies with industrial and office. They looked at office and we looked at multifamily. But as you can see here, looking through their study with LoopNet, we were still in the same range, about 25% with the industrial rate. But with the office rate, it was more so in the 30% rate with vacancies. And there's a reason for this. We have outliers that are in our community that bring down those numbers. One being in an industrial rate, the 1.2 million square feet of industrial space that we have for the now vacant Tuesday Morning building. When we look to put that back online, that brings our numbers down to like 9%, which is better than the average in the region. And we also have that with our office rates. So we look at the 310,000 square feet that we bring back online for the office buildings that we have vacant now. That being the Brinks building and the Boxer properties, our rates will come back up from 32% up to 18 to 19% once those are filled and occupied. So the doom and gloom that is being proposed here is not so. I mean, what I'm trying to say is those outliers are skewing those numbers. And once those buildings are occupied or brought back into commerce, then that put us in a more competitive rate, and we look good because we have a diversified tax base and a diversified economy. Moving forward, we want to increase the number of business and retention visits. We want to do 200 annually, and of those 200, we want to make sure that we visit 50 of the top small and large businesses in the area. We also want to gather meaningful data from the businesses using online surveys and in-person surveys, and we want to make sure that we can bring that data back to the city management and to council to be in aligned with the priorities you guys have set for us. We also want to increase our presence on LinkedIn so that we can showcase our amenities, our city, our different businesses, and bring in that business not only nationally and regionally, but we want people to see us worldwide so they can be able to locate here and see what we have to offer. We also want to host meaningful networking events with the stakeholders, and we want to do that through our partner agencies such as MetroCrest, and then the Workforce Solutions and Dallas College, the Brookhaven campus. And lastly, we want to increase our business retention efforts by attending meaningful stakeholder events such as site selection conferences and meetings and different stakeholder events for the community. And that concludes my presentation. I tried to do it as fast as I could and ask for any questions and discussion at this point.
Thank you, Darren. Sorry, I didn't mean to rush you, but
Okay.
Councilwoman?
You did great. Thank you. I appreciate it. I really liked you taking out the outliers to give it a more true, realistic, view of where we're at. Thank you.
Councilman Reed?
Yeah, information was fantastic. I appreciate you going through it. You did it efficiently, effectively, and quickly, which is great. I have to applaud you and your team for the events that you've had and the impact that you've had on the city, not only retaining the businesses, but bringing the new ones in. So literally, my hat's off to you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Villafranca?
Darren, you did a great job. I can't believe that you've been here for such a short amount of time, and you are a very quick learner. And the tourism team also is doing just a phenomenal job. I think they're the unsung heroes. I don't even think anybody knows they exist.
Right.
But the golf tournament the other day was fantastic. I saw a Too Tall Jones sighting there the other day, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Darren. Great job. This was an item that I asked to bring forward, and I'd like to ask and request that the submit manager have this presentation made to the council on a more regular basis, maybe every quarter or twice a year at least. I think it's helpful for the city to know, and the residents to know just how well we are doing in the area of economic development. So I very much appreciate the hard work. The only other last comment I might have is on slide, I guess it's 7, where you have the different percentages of 10% for the multifamily and 24.6. Is there any way you can lay out, go back one more, is it? Yeah, right there. Is there any way you can share with us in Farmers Branch, maybe how many warehouses we have total? And then you can say, 24% vacancy.
Okay.
And we have 10,000 apartments and 10% vacancy. Just
Okay.
a little added piece there, if that could be helpful. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Darren, thank you for your report. One thing that I would like us to think about for the future, I'll say it here, and that is promoting the facade grant program to more businesses, especially those in some of the older parts of the city.
Right.
I've talked to several folks who are not or have not been aware of that, and so we've seen the fruits of our labor in other neighborhoods where that's been in place, and so I'd just like to see us try to assist more businesses with that.
And it's great that you brought that up, Mayor, because that's what I've been targeting in District 1.
Very good. Thank you. All righty. I'm going to read us into executive session at this point. I've got 5 items, so if you would, please bear with me. Item D1, City Council will convene in closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code. Personnel deliberation for evaluation of city manager, Item D2, the city council will convene a closed executive session pursuant to section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code to discuss economic development incentives for Farmers Branch Project 2025-020. Item D3, city council will convene a closed executive session pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, consultation with the attorney to seek legal advice regarding matters related to Dallas area rapid transit, including but not limited to correspondence, programs, funding, agreements, and any associated legal rights, obligations, or potential actions. Item D4, the city council will convene in closed executive session pursuant to section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code, personnel to deliberate the appointment, employment, compensation, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, the municipal court judge pursuant to section 28-23 of the Farmers Branch Code of Ordinances. And item D5, the city council will convene a closed executive session pursuant to section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code, personnel to review, discuss, and evaluate the city's legal representation. If it would take about 6 minutes, and we will resume in the city manager's conference room.